Hello guys, hope you're all doing well. In today's video, I wanted to put together some of my thoughts and ideas of what we're likely to see occur in BF5 a year from now. So let's say end of 2019 or the beginning of 2020. This could be the amount of maps, weapons, theatres of war, gameplay refinements and anything else I predict will be in the game at that point. We should probably start with things that we already know are coming to the game thanks to the Tides of War roadmap. We know that between January and March we're going to get a new Grand Operation, the return of Rush and a new multiplayer mode called Squad Conquest. As well as that, we're also getting the new co-op mode called Combined Arms. That is all part of the second chapter of Tides of War called Lightning Strikes, and then in March we're getting a new mission for Combined Arms as well as a new multiplayer mode that hasn't been detailed, a new location covering the Battle for Greece and the big one, Firestorm Battle Royale, and that's all part of the Trial by Fire chapter. This gives us a rough idea of when we're going to get big content drops for BF5. The first chapter of Tides of War only lasted 1 month. It started in December but it ended on January the 5th, today. And while we have no official start date for the next chapter, we do know it starts at some point in January this month and will end in March. A bit of quick maths tells us that by the end of the year, we should get another 3 Tides of War chapters alongside the ones that have already been announced. Of course, some of them may last for a shorter amount of time or a longer amount of time. We don't really know that just yet. So what is this going to give us in terms of game content? Well, we've already had 5 new weapons added to the game since its launch in November. 3 of those came as part of the first Tides of War chapters via weekly assignments, and then the other 2 we got as a Christmas gift, the Ribby Roll and the M1897 shotgun. Now those of you who pay close attention to the menu screen may have noticed that all of the classes have weapons that aren't revealed yet. What I mean by that is if you go to the weapon screen on Assault, for example, it says 10 out of 11. Same for Medic, 7 out of 9. It's 10 out of 12 for Support and then 8 out of 9 for Recon. This tells me that there might be weapons already in the game, or at least partially, that DICE are going to be adding down the line. They may not all come with the next Tides of War chapter, but they're definitely at least on their way. There have been some data mined weapons too, but for now, let's not spoil the surprise. With that in mind, we can say with reasonable certainty that another 6 weapons are on the way, but considering there's likely to be at least 2 per Tides of War chapter, more than likely 3 to 4, I think it's fair to say that within a year, we're quite likely to have another 15 to 20 weapons in the game. I don't think that's too much of a stretch. There are actually a few weapons in the single player that don't appear in the multiplayer, like the Delisle Carbine, for example, and the suppressed 1911 and suppressed Kar 98. When it comes to maps, we of course got Panzerstorm in the first Tides of War chapter, but I really think we need 2 maps per chapter to keep players engaged. I hope that by the end of this year, we've doubled the original map count, which was 8 maps before Panzerstorm was added. Let's talk theatres of war next. Right now in BF5 you've got 2 forces, the British and the German. Of course there's been a significant amount of talk about where the American army is and why they aren't featured, or even the Russians. The way DICE are approaching BF5 is that they're using Tides of War almost as a timeline of the war. So over the next year I fully expect the American forces and the Pacific Theatre of War to be added into the game. The United States did not enter the war until late 1941 after the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, but will we see another Wake Island? I'm not so sure on that. I know that some players would love that, but I don't think DICE will want to do a remake yet again. Of course, with the addition of the American army, you then open up the possibility for a ton of American weapons. I think we all know how much people want the M1 Garand in the game. With the addition of the Pacific Theatre, that would also surely mean the introduction of the Japanese army and also addition of amphibious vehicles such as boats, something that BF5 doesn't have right now. You would also have to assume we'll see the addition of the Russian forces at some point too, and that could lead to a map centered around Stalingrad perhaps. And you've got to say that there is an incredible amount of World War II history that hasn't been touched on in this game at all. From various countries to theatres of war to different tanks and weapons. It's not really clear how much of this we're going to see before the year is out, but I think if we ended 2019 and the American and Russians weren't at least in the game, BF5 fans would be pretty upset. So I reckon that by the end of the year we'll have Russian, American and Japanese armies in the game. Let's just briefly talk about something I don't think will make it into the game. Soldier dragging. It's something that's been mentioned for some time now, since before the game launched, but in recent times the language that DICE have used when asked about it seems to suggest that they are certainly not sure themselves if it's something that will make it into the game. They changed their stance to investigating the feasibility of the dragging feature. Now I imagine that there are a lot of moving parts getting a system like that working, and we already know that there are some, well, let's say temperamental ragdolls at time. So perhaps, and I don't know this for sure, that adding another complexity to that system just isn't a good idea right now. There are a lot of occasions though where it would be really awesome and useful to just grab a teammate by the leg and pull them into cover to revive them, but I imagine this brings with it all sorts of other issues, so I'm not convinced that it will ever see the light of day, at least not maybe in Battlefield 5. I'd love to see dragging in the game. In the next 12 months, I'm not so sure. Unless of course there's a legal requirement for them to put it in the game, because they kind of said that it's going to be in the game, so maybe. Will it work? Who knows? I'm sure it'll be fun, whatever. Speaking of seeing the light of day though, what about the RSP, the Rent a Server program? I've spoken on this a few times since release, and I know there are a lot of vocal people wanting information on it, but as of yet, DICE have been very tight-lipped. Is it coming? Are we getting it? Are we not? Right now, it's hard to say because we've really got zero indication apart from a few tweets. I'll say this though, if in a year's time there is no RSP for Battlefield 5, I think that would really concern me. There are so many people that would benefit from having RSP in some shape or another. Communities, content creators, eSports, Easter egg hunters, whatever it might be, RSP is important to a lot of people that enjoy these games. And I want to stay positive on this, and I hope that DICE and EA have realised how important a private server system is to the community as a whole, and they're planning to release an improved system down the line. I have to at least hope. So will we see RSP in the next 12 months? I think we will. I don't know in what form though. And yes, I briefly mentioned esports there, and this is a weird topic when it comes to Battlefield, because in a lot of people's eyes it's just not an esports game and it never will be. I know that's not strictly true, and BF2, 3 and 4 all offered up fantastic competition on all sorts of levels, both in online events and offline events, even if it wasn't as popular as it could have been. Battlefield has never been a big esports game, and it's never really drawn much of an audience. That being said, incursions for BF1 never really got off the ground, and I'm just not sure that DICE would want to put time into Incursions 2.0 in BF5 unless there was a big demand for it, and I don't think that demand is there. There's a small amount of top level players that want this to happen, and I would love to see it happen, but the reality is that in comparison to the overall player count, it's an incredibly small percentage, and a lot of people found Incursions to be quite boring and just not exciting to play or watch. I think there's a slim possibility that if Firestorm turns out to be good, that could evolve into the esports side of Battlefield, as we've already seen plenty of other BR games do that. But again, that's a big if. All of this esports talk aside, I think it's still 100% dependent on RSP, because without RSP, it's already dead in the water pretty much. We'll see. Will we get some kind of Incursions 2.0 in the next 12 months? Maybe an alpha or a beta, but I don't have high hopes. Moving on, one thing I think is going to be improved a lot is the cosmetic side of the game. I hope so. At some point this month, we're supposedly going to be able to buy a real currency to use in-game for the purchase of cosmetic items. To make that worthwhile to people, you really need to offer up some good cosmetics though for them to buy. Otherwise, why would they spend their hard-earned cash? I've talked about this many times before, but in games like Fortnite, players spend money on cosmetics because they're a bit wacky and different, which doesn't really suit BF5, but also because you can see them as the game is third person. So the first thing that BF5 would need to help the sale of weapon cosmetics is a weapon inspect function, just like in CSGO. Just something that enables the player to actually see some of the skins that they're using. And I've talked about this before too, but I think DICE should completely mix up their approach to this and instead offer up more custom animations instead of skins. They could potentially be a really good earner and make up for the lack of premium pass. So imagine custom reloads or custom takedowns. What if when you're reviving a teammate you had a custom animation that only a few players had? None of this would change up the gameplay at all, and that would of course have to be the top priority, but they could offer up something different worth paying for. I know that those sort of things would undoubtedly be a ton of work, but anything worth buying has to be worth it. I think end of round poses could be a real possibility too. When you reach the end screen after your squad has won a game, it would be really interesting if your character could have a unique pose that you could trigger, just like in Siege. Perhaps they have their machine gun over their shoulder, or they're sat on a box cleaning their gun, or whatever it might be. it could at least add another dimension to the customization. Games like COD and Rainbow Six do this already really well. So within a year's time, yes, we're definitely going to have a lot more interesting customization options in the game. If we don't, then I don't think DICE are going to make any more money on this game. Also, do you remember the reveal trailer for BF5? Of course you do. At the beginning of that trailer, we saw what looked like more robust tank customization options. We saw a teddy bear, some bottles, and even a horse's head on the side of a tank. Now, vehicle customization didn't launch with the game, so it's possible that some of these items will come further down the line. It would be fantastic if you could customize your tank with certain visual upgrades regardless of the skin, and add components in a modular fashion. With the last Tiger skin, the tank looks entirely different, especially with the logs. It would be great if certain elements could be added individually to tanks and other vehicles. Do I think this could be realised in a year? Yes, I think something like this is coming. And I wonder if that sort of thing would be possible with player customization too. If you head over to your profile screen within the game and look at your in-game medals, it does this cool animation where it puts a medal around your character's neck when you view each one. I bet most of you didn't even know that was in the game. And I'm not sure how easy that sort of thing would be, but imagine if you could show off individual medals on your person, or even just certain badges, for example, in-game. That would be pretty cool. I also think it wouldn't be out of the question that we've got voice packs 12 months down the line. This massively depends on how authentic they want to keep certain aspects of the game, but as long as they weren't too crazy. I mean, I'm not suggesting Darth Vader voice, for example, but Battlefield friends and people like that would be a great fit for some in-game voiceovers that you could purchase. What about emotes? I know people hate emotes, and I don't want the World War II dab or anything like that, but period-specific emotes could work. Say salutes or something along those lines. Emotes in the game within 12 months? Yes, I think so. Now, one feature that we know has to be improved is the overall UI and assignment system. So I fully expect that when I go back into the game in a year's time, I'll be able to access my assignments from inside of the game without having to leave. I've got zero doubt that these are things that DICE are looking at, and providing there isn't a technical reason as to why it's not possible, I think we will definitely see it integrated. There's already been talk of improving the kill cam or kill screen that you get when you die to further help give players a better understanding of how they died and what killed them. It would be fantastic if this screen showed the damage taken from all players just before your death, just to get a bit more feedback and info. Now, one of my biggest issues with BF5 is new player onboarding. What I mean by that is how well the game teaches new players how to play the game. And I know this sounds pretty daft and straightforward, especially if you're a Battlefield veteran, but think of it from a new player's perspective. Whereabouts in the game, apart from a small hint that pops up, does it ever tell you that you can now revive squad mates? Even further, when does it ever tell you that medics don't have to equip a medical syringe and they just get it by default? Where does it tell new players that as support they can repair a tank at any moment because they too automatically get a repair tool without needing to equip one? When you load up various game modes, it does give you a small video telling you how to play the mode, but I don't think the game does a great job of explaining all the other nuances. I think a proper tutorial mode would be great for new players, and perhaps more of a robust system to ensure that new players play together as much as possible. Are we going to get a fully fledged tutorial mode in the game simulating multiplayer by the end of the year? No, I don't think so. But let me say that I do think with the co-op mode, Combined Arms, DICE could have been implementing some of that onboarding into that mode. If the co-op mode is good and it gives you access to all the weapons, vehicles and gadgets in the game versus AI, then that could be a really good tool for people to learn the game. I think it would also be pretty neat to see the return of Titan mode. With the Pacific Theatre of War, this could be a possibility. Imagine a mode on a map similar to Wake Island, where you have to board an enemy carrier to destroy the engine, let's say. That could be pretty epic. And I know we had a remade Titan mode in BF4, and I wouldn't say that was an overall success. I'm not sure how many players really enjoyed it, but could be something that somehow merged into Grand Operations as a final day. I think the start of BF5's life has been a touch rocky, but there's definitely a lot to look forward to over the next year. I think the next 3 months are going to be a really important time in the game's history, and I'm very interested to look back in a year's time and see how the game has evolved. And that's all for today, folks. Do let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. What are your predictions? What's the game going to look like in 12 months time? If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. That's a great way to support me. Thank you so much. If you didn't like it, dislike it. Subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you in the next one.